Welcome to the True Wealth Investors Real Estate Podcast. Creative investing strategies to help you build true wealth. I'm your host, Chad Harris. Hey everybody, good to see you back. Glad to have you here as always. Today is an important topic. We're talking through various ways, various types of real estate deals to do. And so this is along the lines of that we, with True Wealth, we want to build a business that supports our life, right? It is far too common for people to build this business and they have in their mind that it's going to support their life, but it is far too common that it ends up running their life. And so people end up thinking down the road, they kind of adopt the mindset that this is what I have to do for business, and the time that I have left over is for everything else in life. We want to be really intentional and avoid that trap, right? We want to be intentional about deciding how we want to live our life, what our priorities are, how we're going to structure our business, and then build the business that supports that. Okay. And so this comes up a lot in discussions with people about, should I start wholesaling? Should I be doing flips? Should I hold rentals? And then should I sell houses on terms? You can go on and on and on. Right? Sandwich lease options, all these different things. And then it gets even worse when they go to a conference and they hear successful speakers talk about a specific investing technique as if that is the path to success. Wrap mortgages are where you're going to make the most money. Okay. So today's discussion is part of a recording where I go through different investing strategies and the pros and cons of each. Because if you go to that conference and you hear all those successful people speak and each one acts like their technique is the right one, the truth is they all have been successful in that. They've all made a lot of money, right? But really, each investing strategy has different pros and cons. And so if we look at the life we want to lead and the business we want to build to support that, there should be certain strategies, or there will be certain strategies that match up better to help you achieve your goals. There could be two options that work equally well, and then it just comes down to your preference. What do you like better, right? Um, so it's a really good discussion. I hope that this channel helps you build the business that supports your dream life. That's always the goal, right? And if it helps you, if it inspires you, I ask that you please share it with somebody else, help them, share the channel with other people, tell them about it, or at the very least, leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. Subscribe. I appreciate having you back. Enjoy the recording, and we'll catch you next week. Until then, keep building your dream life one door at a time. Real estate investing 101. Here we go. Main investing techniques. So we can be an investor who wholesales property, and we'll go into kind of what these mean and what the benefits are. We can do retail flips where we buy it, fix it up, and sell it. We can do a buy and hold, which is owning the rental, being a landlord. We can sell on terms, which is where we purchase the property and then create a note and sell that so that we're not the owner anymore. We can purchase notes. Usually those are distressed. We can invest in multifamily, which is usually apartments. Commercial would kind of be in that same category as well. We can do a lease option or variations of that. A lot of people like a sandwich lease option, or we can be a private lender. All of those are different investing techniques. And then there's more we could get into, but these are kind of the primary ones. And each one has some benefits and detractions, right? So the main takeaway I want from this portion of the discussion is that there is no one right way to invest in real estate. Some people, when they go to the OREA conference and they hear a speaker on each of these topics, wholesaling, buy and hold, notes, multifamily, you'll hear people speak about each one, and each speaker will talk as though theirs is the very best option, right? And it's pretty common for people to feel almost overwhelmed, like, well, how do I pick which one? One of these has to be the truly best one. Well, in reality, every one of those speakers has made a whole bunch of money in their specific field, right? You can be really successful in all of these. Sometimes wholesaling is seen as like an entry-level way into real estate. I was just talking to a friend of mine this afternoon who has a wholesaling company in Georgia and generates over $1 million a year. Super advanced wholesaling, right? So there's not one right way of investing. It's more looking at what are the characteristics of each investment and what fits your goals. What would you really like to do? Okay. All right. So what is wholesaling? Wholesaling is where you get you talk to a homeowner directly or an investor, somebody owns the property. You get the house under contract. So you negotiate with the seller, get the house under contract at a very low all cash price generally. And then you're going to market that home to potential buyers. In actuality, you're not, as a wholesaler, you're not really selling the home because you don't own the home. You are selling that contract. So a lot of times you'll hear the phrase assignment of contract. All right. So let's say for just simple numbers, we go out, we talk to a seller and they want $50,000 for their house. And we think that house, if it's fixed up, would be worth $100,000. And so it's a great deal. We get it under contract for 50,000. We don't actually close or see the contract through, but we take that contract and market it and find somebody who's willing to buy that house for 60,000, 10,000 more than the contract. And so they would pay us as the wholesaler an assignment fee of 10,000, and the other 50,000 would go to the seller. And so the wholesaler basically is paid for finding good leads, negotiating good contracts with the seller, and then taking that to a big audience who will pay competitive prices for it. Wholesaling is really good for immediate short-term income. So you have to have good people skills, you have to have good marketing skills, but you don't have to rehab properties. You don't have to really have much of your own money except for marketing. And it allows you to make quick chunks of money doing that. All right. Any questions on wholesaling?
Yes, I got a question.
Yeah.
So you get a sales contract and you get the seller to sign it, right? And then you turn around and the seller doesn't get any money until if and when you can close out a wholesale deal. So isn't the property then tied up? And the seller couldn't sell it if they were pressed as a motivated seller. They can't sell it because you have it under contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the key to all of these, and I stand by this, any investment strategy we talk about, the key is that you are serving the person, your customer, right? So we have to be serving the seller. So if they need money in the next 10 days and we're going to wholesale it and we don't think we can sell it for 30, that's not going to serve them. That's not going to help, right?
Right.
Uh, but if they have a distressed property, they don't know how to sell it or don't want to go through the effort and they're fine waiting 30 or 60 days or whatever it is, then that's a really good thing for them. Yeah. But once they sign the contract with you, the wholesaler, technically they could still sell it to somebody else, even though legally they shouldn't. But when things were going super crazy hot and heavy in the market and wholesalers were going crazy getting huge $30,000 per deal assignment fees, they would record a document. So if they got a house under contract, then they would record this document stating that it was under contract, and that would cloud title so that the house couldn't be sold. A title company would find that.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Good question.
Oh, let me follow up with that, Chad.
Yeah.
But the wholesaler has not given up any consideration. So it's almost like an option. You're controlling the property without putting any money up. You've given no consideration to the seller.
Right. Sometimes they'll put a little bit of money, like
$500.
earnest deposit. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that, but not much. Um, and right, and you're controlling the property without having to use your own money. The difference between it and an option's similar in that you're controlling the property, but an option, you you put some money down for that option, right? You have paid money for the option, and then the option is actually recorded against the property, or mortgage is recorded against the property, so that you do actually control it, right? It can't be sold. Um, you do have tangible legal control of it at that point.
But you have a burning candle, much like you would with a stock option, in that the option is not indefinite. It's for a specific period of time, a
Yeah,
year, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, with the
yeah,
option to buy. And you've already negotiated the purchase price.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
So
so the seller gets the option money. And in the unlikely event that you don't execute the option, then the seller would retain the amount of the option. Yeah. Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, let's say as an example, you're gonna pay 100. You have an option to purchase property for 100,000. You're gonna pay 10,000 in the option fee, or for the right to have that option.
Hmm.
And so they receive $10,000. That's theirs from day one. And the seller can do whatever they want with it. And then if you come up with the other 90, you can execute your option and purchase the property for 100,000, even if the property has now skyrocketed in value to 500,000. You
Hmm.
have that price locked in.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people in Columbus, going crazy with options because of Intel, you know, trying to tie up properties, hoping that that property that's 5,000 an acre will suddenly go to 30,000 an acre, or whatever Intel and Facebook and Google are willing to pay for that development. So,
Mm.
all right, good questions. Um, so I have a podcast. I included a few of these for you guys. If you're interested in wholesaling, I did an interview with Joshua Richards, who's a GD RIA member, who did wholesales, and he walks through the process step by step. So for his wholesale deal, how he found the seller, how he negotiated with the seller, how he um, took care of the contract, and then how he sold it. So if you want more information about that, you can go to episode 133. And the podcast is really wherever you like to get podcasts. Most people are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find it there. You can find it Google Podcasts. It's on YouTube, but it's a little more difficult to search because they're not in episode order. All right. Okay, so we kind of covered this. A wholesaler has to be good at marketing, but
Can you
you're
go back a slide, please? Can you go back to that last slide?
yep,
Okay, got it. Thanks.
yeah. A wholesaler needs to be good at marketing. You're either going to work a specific neighborhood, like driving $4, or you're going to purchase a list of potential homes. You can do that online, and then do a letter or postcard campaign where you mail out something to those sellers to try to get them to call you. And then once they call, you'll need to screen the calls, and um, out of 10 or 15 calls, you may get one or two candidates or one or two people who you could potentially buy the house if you can come to terms. So if you're doing actual direct mail, and if you get a couple potential deals, you would want to look at the home and make sure what they told you about the home is correct. But with driving for dollars, you wouldn't actually send mail. You would just drive through neighborhoods. Let's say right now you go through a neighborhood and there's a bunch of mail sitting by the front door, or the grass is tall, or there's a tarp on the roof or something like that. Then you would know that there's some distressed issue with the house. In the winter, it's kind of similar. If there's snow on the ground and you drive by and the snow's been down a week and there's no tire tracks in the driveway, then you know that house is probably empty. So there's low cost ways to find deals, or if you want to ramp it up, you can spend more money on marketing. I was with a big wholesaler and flipper last week, and all of his leads came from TV ads. So if you wanted to go that big, I mean, you could do billboards and TV ads. Let's see
Is
here.
that the local fellow the couple that I've been seeing on TV here locally?
I doubt it. It's John and Amy. They're in Oklahoma. I think
Oh, okay.
their main market.
There's a local group doing some of that as well with
Really?
TV campaign ads.
Okay.
I cannot remember the name of them offhand, but if I think of it, I'll let you know.
Yeah,
It's a local couple that's buying up a bunch of stuff with TV ads.
cool. All right. So I think we covered this, but once you talk to the seller, you'll need to be able to communicate over the phone or meet directly. I usually screen the calls over the phone, and if it sounds like there's potential for a deal, then I'll set up a time to meet with them at the house. And it's always easier to actually negotiate if you're sitting with them at the house. You have to be willing to listen to stories, all kinds of things that really have nothing to do with the house, but they do have a lot to do with the seller and the motivation of the seller. So you'll want to talk to them, hear their stories, and it's really a relational process. And you have to be able to know kind of what your exit strategy would be and what price you could get from somebody else. Those are kind of the key parts of wholesaling. All right. Retail flipping or rehabbing, or every HGTV episode, is a strategy where you're going to purchase a property. Usually it's all cash at a discount with the goal of fixing it up and reselling it quickly for profit. And so the profit is generated in the renovations. And usually the profit is generated by changing the financing available. So let's say I can buy a house for $100,000, but the only way to buy that $100,000 house is all cash. because it needs so much work it wouldn't qualify for a bank loan. Well, there aren't many people sitting on $100,000 cash, so the buyer pool is very small. Well, then we're going to make some repairs to the house, thereby making the house more valuable and nicer. But also by making repairs, now it would qualify for an FHA loan for a first-time home buyer. That explodes the buyer pool, and suddenly you would have a whole bunch of buyers who really aren't even using their own money to buy the house. They're using the money from the loan to buy the house, and so they're willing to pay more. That's the essence of flipping. Okay, so the in comparison with wholesaling, it takes longer than wholesaling. So wholesaling might be 30 days for a transaction. A flip might be 3 to 6 months. And you should make more money with a flip than a wholesale, but you have the risk of the rehab, because you're going to actually have to purchase the property, actually put money into the rehab, and then leave all that money sitting in the property until you're able to sell. So there's much higher risk on a flip. So the activities that a flipper does, you're going to need to source deals either from a wholesaler or do your own marketing to talk directly to a seller, or buy a property on the MLS. The MLS is what, the multiple listing service. So that's kind of the list that all realtors are using. You need to evaluate the property based on what it would sell for, and have a good method for estimating the rehab costs. And you're going to need to be able to manage that contractor. Or if you're doing it yourself, you need to know how to do the work. And you would actually purchase that property and put it into your name. All right. And then for flipping, you're going to replace the mechanicals first, the HVAC and plumbing. You may have to do the roof, windows, could be siding. You're going to definitely do kitchen and bath areas because those have the highest value. Usually doing a lot of flooring and painting. And then there could be some exterior upgrades or landscaping, and then you'll put the property up for sale. So when you put the property up for sale on a flip, let's say you purchase it for 100, you put 30 into it, so you have spent 130,000. Even if that's not your money, it could be money from a private lender or hard money lender. And then you sell it for, well, let's just say 180,000, and you pay some closing costs, and you end up making about $35,000 above the 130 that you used to purchase and rehab it. So that 35,000 you can pull out as profit, and then you still have the 130 that you received back and paid your lender back, and you can use that for the next deal. So flipping is good that it's sustainable, and you can use the same money in deal after deal after deal. Oh, any questions on flipping?
So go over the cash flow implications again. So I buy a house for 100,000, and I use a hard money lender.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I buy the house for 100,000, and I've done my guesstimating, my real good educated guesstimating, and I'm going to need to put 30,000 in it, and houses around it within a radius of about a quarter of a mile are selling between 160 to 180. So let's see, I got hard money for 100. I got 30,000 in it in the rehab. The rehab is done. I'm going to put it on the market, asking 180. I've done my comps to know that comparables houses have gone for 155 to 180. So off the top, I'm seeking 180. And if I can't get the 180 and I come down, I'm still in the margin of what my comparables have gone for to support my asking price.
Correct.
Then the question becomes, how do you, well, we have to learn how to find hard money lenders, because in my mind, I'm thinking to do a deal like that, I need to have 100K. And I guess what you're really saying to us is you might have 100K, but it doesn't matter if I have it myself or if I source it from a hard money lender, right? So if I
Right.
source it from a hard money lender and I still sell the property for 180, the hard money lender is going to get back probably 115 for use of their money, right? Then I
So yeah,
take,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
then, so if I sold it for 180, hard money lenders is going to get 115, 65K. Then my rehab costs was 30, 65, 30. So I'm at 35K net, plus or minus a couple $1,000 here or there.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
That's your basic ballpark there.
All right.
So when you go to list your flip, you'll hire a realtor, right? And
Yes.
that realtor will pull a CMA report, which is a comparative market analysis. And that will show your comps, and you'll try to fit your house best with those houses that have sold. And in reality, if you're a really sharp, astute flipper, you're going to have your realtor pull the CMA when you start, and you'll get to see what the comps are. And then you can look at those listings and actually see how big a rehab they did. Did they put those houses, if they sold for 180, let's say, did they put granite countertops in, or were they laminate countertops?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? How
Mm-hmm.
fancy were the light fixtures? Was it carpet? Was it laminate flooring? Was it hardwood flooring?
Right. Right.
And then you're going to fix it up to match that.
And
So,
the zip code would dictate that, because in some areas, in some markets, you can rehab the house and can't sell it.
right.
You'll price yourself out of its location.
You can over rehab really easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's especially easy to do that if you like the rehab process, right? If you really want that house to look really great, it's easy to say, oh, this house would look wonderful if we did true
Mm-hmm.
hardwood and not laminate flooring, or if we did granite and not laminate countertops or whatever it is. But if the market won't justify that, then you're actually just eating your profit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, good point.
Hey, Chad, this is Andre. You mentioned that report is called a CMA.
Hmm.
Is that correct? Okay, so if I were to talk to a realtor, I mentioned CMA, hey, I'm looking to buy this. Can you run me like a pre-CMA? He's going to know exactly what I'm talking about, and he'll be able to say, hey, if you fix it up to these standards, this is about what you can get, or how does that process typically work?
Yeah, so you would tell them I'm looking for a CMA report on this address. I'm planning to do a flip. And then if that CMA doesn't have links to, and you would give them the information. So you're going to tell them it's a 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,200 square feet, and then any other thing that might affect the value. 1 story, 2 car attached garage, whatever it is, right? And so that's what they're gonna fill in, so that they're pulling properties that are actually comparable to yours. And um and then they should give you kind of a ballpark. These houses are the most similar to yours. And so I still do that with my realtor, even like right now. I'm adopting the philosophy with my rental portfolio that every year I should sell a few of my worst and reinvest that money in, and like constantly be upgrading, right?
Mm.
And so even now I do that consistently. I'll reach out to the realtor, say I'm looking to sell this property. Um, the address, the specifics about the property, and then ask for their estimation of what they would want to list it for if I list it with them. And they'll give me their ballpark estimate based on the CMA. They'll give me the data they used. And then I can go from there and say, okay, this one is worth selling retail, right? I'll fix it up to the level of these comps and sell it to a first-time home buyer. Or this one, the comps are looking more like it's an investor buying a rental, so I'll fix it up to that level. Or some, I think, it makes more sense based on the numbers to sell it on terms, and I'll basically provide seller financing to another investor. So that CMA report kind of gives you on the back end what your numbers are going to be so that you can make a good decision with the property. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. I tend to maybe give too many options, but the CMA report will give your comps, and your realtor will be able to give you an idea of what it should sell for.
I have
Okay.
a question. I
Yeah.
have, well, this is like my property, my commercial property. It's hard to find a CMA. Is that, I mean, look, like where this is at, there hasn't been much sold in the area, so I'm trying to come up with a CMA like on a commercial space and on the second floor, 2 apartments. Do you have any suggestions on how to? So I contacted a couple realtors and they're like, oh, this is sort of really hard to find out what this is going to be. So what would you
Yeah. You know,
recommend?
commercial, if it's a true commercial property, its valuation's not going to be based on comparables.
Mhm.
Your valuation is going to be based on the cap rate and NOI. So it's going to be a multiple of the profitability of the property. And so that's true for apartments or, true commercial if you're buying a Walgreens or something like that. So I don't know what the specifics of your property are, but unless it's something really weird, the realtor should be able to, especially if it's a commercial realtor, they should be able to find the cap rate for that area and that type of property. And then, as long as you can come up with either what the existing NOI is or the potential NOI, you can come up with a valuation.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
You,
That's so that brings up a really interesting thing. So because commercial properties are valued differently than if you were to do a flip, but it's a commercial property, let's say a 10-unit apartment complex. And this is more often you see it in the BRRRR strategy, but that's really the same process. Okay. But if, let's say for this example, we're going to flip a 10-unit apartment complex. Well, since it's commercial, anything over 4 units is a commercial property. And so you would not be doing a CMA where you're looking at comps. You would be doing the NOI, which is the net operating income of the property. So that's the income of the property minus its expenses, not including debt, is NOI. And then you're going to multiply that times the cap rate or that multiple. So if we're going to flip an apartment, we may not even have to fix the property up. But let's say the rents are $200 below market, then we purchase the property and all we do is, as those leases renew, we increase the rents, then we have increased the NOI, which increases the value of that property.
Is the
Okay.
NOI the net operating income?
Net operating income. Yeah.
Okay, I guessed that one. So okay.
So you can increase the income, right? The rents, or you can decrease the expenses. Maybe you start charging for water, put in LED bulbs instead of, big chandeliers or something. And if you increase that net, your net income on the property, then you increase the valuation of that property. So
I want to just throw in a little additional comment here that about the NOI, which is that they will also use that to figure out your valuation for your taxes. So keep that in mind as well.
sure. Cool.
If you ever need to do a tax adjustment and complain about your taxes or anything, you'll need to know that information as part of your complaint to the county.
That's a good idea. Okay. Let's jump to
And,
buy and
oh,
hold.
sorry. And I've also used that same process on single families too. Not necessarily single families that were being used as rentals. It ended up making the value lower than what it was at the time. And using that net operating income was a way of, there weren't many comps 15, 20 years ago when people were not selling anything. Like nothing was worth selling at that time. It was all about holding. And so we were able to use that on single families as well as a measure of a comp. Instead of a comp, you could use your NOI for evaluation.
That's a good idea. Or if you have a property that's unique in some way, maybe it has some acreage or something. That's a good idea to try to justify that lower valuation. Yeah. All right, we'll talk about buy and hold. I think a few people said they were buy and hold investors. Buy and hold investing is where you're going to purchase that house, apartment, condominium, and sometimes fix it up, but primarily you're going to rent it to an individual or business. And the benefit to buy and hold is that you should have monthly income coming in from the property, and over time you will generally pay down the loan for the property and the valuation of the property will go up. So as long as you are holding that appreciating asset, your wealth will increase over time. The downside is that you don't make big chunks of money on the front end like a flip or a wholesale. And most houses come with a tenant and a toilet. And so you can have some headaches over time dealing with that. So in each of these strategies, you kind of have to consider, am I in this for quick cash and I really want to change my lifestyle right now? Or is this a long-term play and I'm looking to build wealth and increase my net worth over time? When I started, I pushed everything off. So I just wanted everything to stay in the business and tried not to spend anything I didn't have to, and tried not to sell a property. And that worked really well because I built a portfolio quickly. It wasn't always easy, but over time, that deferred gratification worked. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe it'd be good to do some flips occasionally and get that bump up in income this year, right? It just depends on what you're after and what your goal is. So
Does that apply anywhere? Like, let's say you buy a property in like a bad area in Dayton, which there are many. Are you going to get appreciation over time, or that comes with raising rents? You know what I mean?
yeah, it depends. So over the last 10 years, everything appreciated. Okay. So a house that was 10 years ago is 110 now, even in the city, not in the best area. I guess you'd have some areas now, maybe on the west side, that all fixed up would be 60, 70, something like that. Or maybe I'm not as familiar with East Dayton, what the sale prices fixed up would be. But yeah, it depends on the window you're looking at. So probably the 10 years before that, there would have been plenty of areas that didn't appreciate, right? So my philosophy on anything that is any property that is a, let's say, a C neighborhood or a B minus neighborhood and is being purchased primarily for cash flow, meaning it's a cheaper property that still rents well, but there's could be some headaches involved in that management, right? It's not a, you've got maybe more renters in the neighborhood than you have homeowners. Then we have to make sure that we purchase that property at least 70% of the value of the house. So we force appreciation, right? We're the day we close, we are pushing that appreciation in because we bought it so cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So on the other side, so the market, it doesn't have to go up if it's a, let's say a $100,000 house and we paid 70, we don't really have to have appreciation. However, if it's an A neighborhood and it's mostly homeowners and the tenant that you're going to get there is going to be really low maintenance, then I know that area is going to appreciate over time, right? Because people will pay money as their income goes up, they will be willing to pay more because they can afford more to live in that neighborhood. So,
Hey, hey, Chad.
yeah.
So how do you pull money out of a property that you've purchased? You've been renting it for 1, 2, 3 years. How do you go about pulling money out?
Usually to pull money out, you're either going to, I mean, it's a good question and a one that a lot of people are dealing with if they've been investing a while because there's been appreciation, right? So how
Right.
do we, and it's an interesting question because usually we figure our return based on our cash invested. So let's say we put 10% down into a property, we can get a really good return because we have so little down and we're using leverage, right?
Yeah.
But as we pay down the debt and the value of the property goes up, in actuality, our return diminishes because maybe we're making 300 a month on this rental, but we have $50,000 in equity sitting there. And if we took that $50,000 and put it into something else, we could make a lot more than that, right?
Yeah. So how do you get the equity out?
Yeah. So to get the equity out, you can, one, sell it, right? You get the equity out, you pay taxes. Two, you can do a second mortgage. Maybe that's a line of credit.
Okay.
Maybe that's another mortgage, but some kind of debt product
Okay.
there. Or you can get real creative. You could do a sale that's a 1031, so you don't pay taxes, and then you put the proceeds into another property that's an upgrade in property. You could get seller financing that might be really good terms, but you give them like a loan, a second mortgage on that property because you have so much equity, something like that.
Okay.
So maybe the seller, they say, I don't really want, if you default, I don't really want this property back because I'm trying to get rid of this property. But if you have this other property that's nice and has equity in it, then you could give them a mortgage on that. That would be some ways I would leverage that equity to grow the portfolio.
So if I want a equity line of credit on the property, do I only show the numbers just for that one property when I go to the financial institution, aka the credit union and not the bank?
It's going to, most likely, the credit union is going to want to look at everything as a whole, especially for a line of credit. They're going to look at all your properties. I don't, usually if you go to a DSCR lender, they'll look at just that one property.
You use an acronym, DSCR.
DSCR, a debt service coverage ratio is what DSCR is. And so basically, a lender that you would refer to as a DSCR lender, they are lending more on the asset than you as a borrower. And so usually, the process is easier. They're not going to require tax returns and things like that. They're not going to look at your portfolio as a whole. They're just going to look at that one asset and say, if we lend you money, will that asset perform to pay us back? And if not, maybe do you have cash in reserves or something else?
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure right now if DSCR lenders do a line of credit, but they're actually pretty active right now, and their rates are really have come down. So I know one bank that I work with does lines of credit on rentals, but they're going to look at the whole thing, whole portfolio and tax returns and credit check and blah blah blah, you know, blood test of your firstborn son and
Yep.
everything
Yep.
else.
Yep.
And
And not to tie this up, but if the property is in a entity and not in my name, and I have the one property in the entity, um, does that help the process?
Usually if it's in an LLC, that helps the process if it's a commercial lender or a DSCR lender.
Okay.
I,
All right.
uh,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
Hey Chad, talking
yeah.
about the property before, let's say it's East Dayton because I have my properties in Five Oaks. And to force appreciation, can I raise rents yearly? Because I was talking to other people and they're like, oh, rents don't raise, which is weird because I rent now currently and it's raised every year. So is that something I can do as well?
Rents go up every year, 100%.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what I was saying. And is there a percentage that we use? Because I was looking at the law, it says there's no amount that landlords can raise rent in Ohio. But what is a good ballpark?
What?
So, it, so there's no limit. Like it's not like you're limited to say you can only raise it 2% or something. So that's really why you want to raise it every year because I mean, for a while I was under the philosophy that you don't raise rents and you keep your tenants happy and they stay. But man, the rents have been skyrocketing so much that then you get way behind, right? And it's one thing if you reach out and you say, I'm raising your rent 3%. It was $800. Now it's going to be 824. It's a whole nother deal if you say, hey, your rent's been $800 for too long, it's going to 975 or 1150 or something like that. Then you get a lot of pushback and grief. So it's much easier. We currently do, it's anywhere from 3% to 10% on the renewal. And that we base that off of Rentometer, or just what that neighborhood reports as rent. And then if they don't want to renew the lease, there's a bigger bump for month to month. So let's say it's probably a typical scenario would be 5% for a lease renewal right now, and then like anywhere from 10% to 15% if they want to stay month to month.
Do I indicate that in the lease prior to them signing?
No, that's part of the renewal process because you want the freedom to change it every year. If if something goes crazy and the government prints money again, you don't want to be held to a 3% rent increase in your lease. So on the renewal process, we do it like 60 days out from the renewal. You send them a letter that says, here are your lease is getting ready to renew. Here are your options. If you don't notify our office, we will go with option A. If you want something different, notify our office or return the letter, something like that. And so then they get to choose Do they want whatever it is, $50 increase or a $150 increase and be month to month? It's up to them.
Oh, okay, so I don't have to put it necessarily in my lease. I was creating leases now, and I wanted to put it somewhere in the notes that, hey, by the end of this term, I'm going to increase it from 3 to 6%. But I was going to give them the lower end, so they won't feel as bad if since I went 3%. So don't indicate it in the lease, right?
Do not. I would not put the amount rent increase in the lease. You can put like, it'd be good to put, let's say like, if this lease goes month to month, which most leases say, if this lease exceeds 12 months, it will go month to month. And it's good to put in there, if not renewed, the new month to month rate will be $150 higher than current rent unless notified by management, something like that. So if, let's say, you drop the ball and you forget, you can still bump the rate if they don't renew. Okay. But you want the flexibility that maybe the market stalls, maybe the economy tanks, and maybe you only want to raise it 1%, right? You want that flexibility. You're the owner. You don't want to have the lease tie your hands. So you want to give it the freedom to make the property as profitable as possible, but not tie your hands and restrict you. I hope that makes sense. I could go on and on and on about leases. Another good clause to put in there is if they break the lease and leave without, or in their 12 months that they owe, I think ours is a $1,500 fee for early release or early termination. And when I made that clause, I thought, if somebody just ditches and leaves, there's no way they're going to pay that. But man, we have made thousands of dollars over the years by people who decide to leave, or their job changes or whatever, and they have to break the lease, and they'll pay that fee for that. So
As
What if they
part of
don't
that,
pay it?
yeah, I was going to follow with that with that Angel. Would part of that be the recoupment is settled by the security deposit, and then the difference is that is what you will go after to get from them?
the fee is separate. Everything's separate from the security deposit. So
Okay.
the security deposit is only for repairs, right? So what they are told is the security deposit is only for repairs, and then it will be reimbursed to them. They always owe every fee and everything. They can't move out and say, oh, just have the security deposit take care of it. Because as soon as they say, I'm not paying this month, just let the deposit take care of it, there's a bunch of repairs waiting there too that aren't going to be
Yeah.
covered.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
What type of repairs do you come across when that happens?
oh, everything.
Holes in the wall, painting.
Yeah, we can go from like,
Floods.
I'll go for the full spectrum. It could be a nail hole in the wall picture, and it could be the door ripped off the hinges, and
The
it'll
whole
go
house is flooded.
yeah, the whole house can be
I've seen people get really mad, and I remember there was one property owner who, when we went into their home, we found that the tenant had actually stopped up the sink in the kitchen and the bathroom on purpose and turned on the water, and the house had more than $30,000 worth of damage, and they had to absolutely sue the crap out of that tenant.
Ooh,
Wow.
Were
yeah,
they successful were they successful in getting any money out of the tenant?
I honestly, I don't remember. It's been about 15 years since that
Yeah.
happened, but I do remember that they had to sue them.
I guess a shameless plug there. Make sure that your insurance is right as a landlord.
there you go. Yeah, good timing on that. That was
100%.
yeah, 100%. I was gonna say too, with a move out, so our process, we have a move out packet that they receive, even if they're being evicted, and it says, you know, here are the things you'll be charged for, and those charges will come out of your deposit. And so we want you to be able to put the property back in the condition it was when you rented it and receive all of your deposit back. And so that spells out for them, change the furnace filter, change the any light bulbs that are out, change the battery and smoke detector, like those little things, clean. And even if they're being evicted, you'll get your property back in much better condition.
Okay.
So all good questions, guys. I love it. So, so kind of the activities of a buy and hold investor, we're going to rehab the property to a rent level, not a retail level. I know from experience that tenants tend to bring a property to their level of expectation. And so we want to fix it up to that level of the area. We'll need to have a lease, right? Including all those great clauses, Angel. We need to determine fair market rent. It's really easy currently with Rentometer. Advertise for tenants, super easy.
Rentometer?
What's that?
Rentometer?
Rentometer. There's rentometer.com. Yeah, you can use it so many times free, and then it's maybe like $40 a year or something. It's not very much.
You say that's Rent-O-Meter?
Yeah. Yep.
Is that an app or it's a website?
I think it's just, oh, I always use it in the website.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at it now. It's a free trial, free access for 3 days for 0. You get 25 estimates, but then it's about $80 a month, or $80 for a year, or $30 a month. So
You gotta
$80.
put your credit card information, so that's where they get you.
yeah. I think it's 89 for their pro version. It looks like, Chad.
There must be a cheaper version because
That's for a full year.
yeah. Well, however, I used like I went through like 5 email addresses, you know, using the free trial over and over. And then finally was like, okay, we're just
Yeah,
gonna
that's
go
right.
ahead and buy this.
That's right.
You know, I'm kind of cheap in that way now, I'll admit it.
Yeah, frugal, not cheap.
Frugal, yeah,
Yeah,
frugal.
frugal.
Right,
There we go.
right,
That sounds a
right.
lot better.
Or
Frugal.
resourceful. Resourceful is even better.
Those are the tips we're looking for.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it does do a good job of justifying why the rent is what it is. It gives you comps basically for the exact units that you're comparing it to. So it provides a lot of good information. If you use Appfolio, it has something similar in it. I don't know if Buildium does. I don't know if that has something similar. So, and then advertising for tenants. I mean, there's a whole bunch of places you can advertise, but Zillow's far and away the #1 place. And you need to understand fair marketing or fair housing rules, and be able to screen tenants. All right. So you want to rent slowly and get the best person in. If your applicant says, I got cash money, I am ready to move in today, then that's a problem and probably not your ideal tenant. Your ideal tenant wants to give 30 days notice of where they're currently renting and fill out the application. And they want to move slowly too. And
Chad,
I'm big on systems. So we do a virtual tour online and they have to watch the virtual tour. They have to fill out an application and pay the fee to be pre-qualified before they ever get to see the house. Once they go to see the house, it's what they schedule it on their own with a digital lockbox. They tour the property on their own. They return the key on their own. And then they're approved and they get to move in. So we never even meet our tenants, which is kind of interesting. I never would have expected that long ago. So, but big on systems.
Chad, I'm doing this now where I'm screening tenants, and some of them don't have a credit, but they're like 40, 50 years old. Is that a red flag that I can't see the credit?
Well, what do you think if let's say I've had a paid off house for 30 years and I don't have a credit card? I mean, I wouldn't have a credit score. Is that a red flag?
Yeah.
What it is? You wouldn't like to rent to somebody who's never used a credit card and doesn't have any debt?
Now, of course not, because they're not in that game. I mean, everybody has a credit card. Everybody rents out stuff, cars, stuff.
No,
No,
no, no,
No? So what?
no.
no,
People use cash for everything?
Yeah,
Most people use credit cards.
no. Well,
no, I live
oh,
on what I earn.
So
I don't use
you
credit cards.
So that means you don't have credit.
I do not currently have credit. I have had
Oh.
credit in the past, but it's been a long time ago. I worked hard at it, and then my life changed, and now I am 45 and I have no credit. And I've paid off 4 car loans in the last 10, 15 years. I had to have co-signers on every single one of those, even though I paid every single payment on time. And I paid it myself. I had no help. But because I can't seem to establish enough credit, I can't get my own credit, but I am absolutely credit worthy.
Oh, that's good to know. So that's not even a red flag once I see somebody doesn't have credit.
Not necessarily. It
not
Every-
could be, but it's not
necessarily.
an
everybody has
absolute.
a story, Kim, right? That's what
Yes.
you want to say. Everybody's got a
Yep.
story. Yeah.
So I would so our philosophy in our office is basically any one thing isn't a red flag and there's 4 non-negotiables, 5 non-negotiables. They have to have 3 times the rent. They can't have an eviction in the last 5 years. I forget what the other ones are. I don't process the applications anymore. But there's not one thing, right? If they come up and they don't have credit, well, okay, that's not the end of the world because it could be a really good thing, right? Any Dave Ramsey protege, that's like their ideal is to never have credit. But it could be on the other side that they've provided a fake social security number and an alias, and who knows? So I would just include that with everything else, right? Do they have a good work history? Um, it's like looking at the whole thing, looking at it as a whole. So I hope that helps, Angel. There's no, um, the best way is to have a pretty big criteria. And the thing I like best is you have a long criteria, and anything that doesn't quite make sense, you put back on them, right? So let's say they say they haven't had a car payment. That's why they don't have credit. Well, okay, perfect. Show me the deed to your car, right? Prove it is kind of how we handle it, and just put the work on them constantly and take the work off of us. So if something in the credit check and background check doesn't quite add up or prove that they're the right tenant, like no credit at all, then I'm going to ask for more information for them to prove why they don't have credit.
And
I
that's legal.
absolutely support that, Chad. That's absolutely when I processed rental applications, that is the process. You find
All
something that
right.
doesn't match and you put it back on that person and they have to show you why it would work. They have to prove everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's legal. I can ask for that information. I know I was asking for ID, driver's license, and pay stubs. I can also ask for that deed of a car.
You can ask, I mean, whether the deed of the car isn't like a protected class or something. So you need to have you need to follow fair housing. But yeah, you can ask for any proof, right? If even if your application says 2 pay stubs and you look at the pay stubs and you're like, that doesn't quite look right, right? It costs probably $5 to get a pay stub on Fiverr. So just ask for more, right? Put the work on them. Oh, actually, and I would even defer. I'd say, man, I know I asked for 2 pay stubs, but my boss is now telling me we're gonna need 4, right? And just what's that called? It's like the multiple C's. So you have credit worthiness. What is the C for? And I'm drawing a complete blank. There's a C for um, whether they'll go along with your instructions and do what you tell them to do.
Compliancy?
Compliance. There we
Compli-
go. Perfect. Thank you, Samuel. So compliance, you can always reject somebody for compliance. You can reject somebody for cleanliness. Yeah. All right. Usually I wouldn't tell them they're not clean, but maybe their car isn't clean or their house isn't clean, and they would be rejected for something else. So
What if they're a smoker? Do you reject them for that too?
it really depends on the area. Some areas we enforce or advertise no smoking. Some areas it seems like everybody smokes, and I don't have the time or intention to enforce it. So
Hey
some
Jay.
of that you
Oh,
enforce with fees. So like let's say dogs, you can say no pets allowed, and there's going to be a dog in that yard sooner or later, and you're going to have to give a 30-day notice, and there's going to be a long process where you try and enforce it, and then suddenly the dog disappears, and then the dog's back, and you could waste, I don't even want to go into how many hours trying to enforce that. Or you just put in the lease that for a dog on the premises, there is a registration fee and a monthly pet rent. And any pet seen on the premises, those fees are applied. And then, bam, as soon as the maintenance guy shows up and there's a dog in the house, those fees are put on the tenant ledger, and suddenly it's in the tenants suddenly it's their problem to try to figure out how to pay the fees and get out of future fees instead of our problem of how to get the dog out of the house. So yeah, I could go down a long rabbit hole with, and I'm sure Kimberly could too, with the lease and enforcement and things like that. um, but okay, back to real estate investing models. So another one is selling a property on terms. In Ohio, we're a land contract state, so a lot of times you hear selling on land contract, something like that. And basically, it's where um, you purchase property and then you sell it to someone else where you become the bank. So you create a note and a mortgage and you receive monthly payments on the house similar to rent, but that tenant buyer is the owner even if the deed's not in their name, and they're responsible for maintenance. So you get a little more money up front, more than a security deposit, and you have less expenses because you're not doing maintenance and repairs and turns.
Is a fair amount to ask them to put down greater than 10 to 20% so that they have some skin in the game?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a like legitimate fair amount, but usually, at least in Ohio, it's beneficial for you not to collect 20% or more because especially if you're selling on a land contract, um, if they have paid less than 20% down and it's less than 5 years, then if they don't make a payment, the restitution comes through an eviction, just like a tenant. But
Okay.
if they've paid 20% down or it's been over 5 years, then it's a foreclosure process like a bank.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so if you're selling, you want less down. If you're buying and you're at all nervous about the situation, then it's kind of beneficial to put more down.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Wow.
All right.
Hey,
So,
oh,
who was that?
yeah, this is Andre. Hey, Chad. Quick question. Um, for some of these different investments, I didn't know if you were going to talk about it when you got to the private lending section, but in terms of getting money to invest in these different uh, avenues, as for
Yep.
instance, I
I,
know you mentioned wholesaling, you don't need a whole lot, but okay, so you are going to talk about it later then.
I'll talk about yeah, different financing options. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And I'm glad to answer any questions. It'll probably make more sense once we get there.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Yeah. So another method is a lease option. And those need to be two separate documents. So you should have a lease and an option. Um, and so in a lease option, basically, if we're purchasing on a lease option, that means we're renting the property and we have the option to purchase that property at a set price for a term in the future, let's say for the next 10 years. And a lot of times the two documents are somehow linked. So let's say I pay my rent that I'm paying them is $1,000 a month, and on the option, every month that I pay my rent on time, I get a $100 credit, let's say. So it kind of the option pays down similar to a mortgage. So um, that's a good way to purchase a property if, let's say, you don't have much money, right? You're just renting the house and giving some money for an option. It could be a good way to purchase if you're trying to get seller financing and the seller is not real comfortable actually selling the property, but he is willing to give you the chance to prove yourself with the monthly lease payments and set up financing to do the option in the future. A lot of people who do lease options like they do a sandwich lease option where they're purchasing with a lease option and selling. So maybe they purchase with $1,000 rent and $1,000 option fee, and they're going to buy the property at $100,000, and then they sell on 15 or well, let's just say $1,400 rent, $14,000 option fee, and $140,000. So they're going to make money, a spread on that option fee. They're going to make a spread on the monthly rent, and they're going to make a spread whenever the options are exercised. So that's usually where you hear lease option. A note buyer is a person who buys not the actual property, but the note tied to the property. And when you buy that note, then you start receiving the monthly payments from that note. Usually, note buyers are buying distressed notes. So let's say the owner of the house still owes $70,000 on the mortgage, but they're behind in payments. And so the owner of the mortgage is willing to sell the $70,000 of payments for $60,000, let's say. And so they'll discount it to be able to get the cash up front, and you're willing to pay the money to get those monthly payments over time. So it's long term, it's similar to a rental, but you don't actually own the property and you don't necessarily deal with tenants. But really good note buyers usually buy a note that is distressed and then negotiate with the person who's paying the note to get them back on track, whether you add payments to the end of the note or restructure the payment, something like that.
When you
Usually,
when you say distress, Chad, Are you talking specifically about the financial situation of the person in the home, or are you talking about the condition of the property, or both?
I'm not talking about the property whatsoever.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So the distressed note is going to be a note that's been either the payer is missing payments, or there's a bunch of late payments, or there's something happening where the owner of the note is worried they're not going to get paid. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, and then if you're a note buyer, you can get super creative. You can buy, let's say, 30 years worth of payments, and then you can sell out like the first 5, the last 10. You can get super creative with it if you're financially minded. But that's like a whole nother level. Okay, private money investing. So if you are a person who you have the money, that's not the issue, but the issue is you maybe don't have the time to actually figure out how to invest in real estate, or whatever issue. You would rather just get a return on your money. Then you can be a lender in real estate. And so you get a higher profit than you would get in a CD or a bond or something like that. And your investment's secured by real estate, and you get a fixed rate of return. So that would be a private lender. Okay, so we'll talk about how to find a property, and then we'll talk about how to finance a property. All right. Okay, so how to find a property. The easiest way is going to be with a realtor. So realtors all have access to the MLS, or multiple listing service. And so you talk to them, you say, I'm looking to buy a house in this zip code for around this amount of price. And they'll give you a list of all the listed houses, or houses that are listed with a realtor for sale. All right. So the benefit of that is you have access to houses very quickly that you know are for sale. The negative is that no matter what that seller's motivation is, that they need to sell and they want to sell their house, as soon as they talk to a realtor, the realtor is trying to push them towards getting the most money out of the deal that they can. Okay. And so it becomes very competitive, and sometimes it's hard to find a deal, especially over the last couple of years, where it's a seller's market and there's a lot of competition, and houses don't sit on the market very long. It's very easy for a realtor to bump the price, which isn't necessarily always beneficial to the seller. Okay, the other way, some other ways would be you can talk to a wholesaler, right? So wholesalers, their job or their strategy is to find sellers who want to sell their house but haven't listed it with a realtor, and figure out their motivation and how to solve their problem for them. And they get it under contract, and then they email out those listings. And so if you're looking for deals, you can network with a whole bunch of wholesalers, and you'll get texts and emails constantly of different properties that they have for sale. Another way is networking with other GD RIA members. So it's kind of interesting because, you would think there are buyers and sellers, but in actuality, a lot of investors, are always buying and selling, right? So I have two houses, or I have a single family that's getting listed with the realtor tomorrow. I have a double that'll be listed with the realtor next week. I have another single family that I'm listing on our website, selling on terms with seller financing. And at the same time, I'm marketing for new deals, right? So it's just a fact of as your business changes, the assets you want are different and the financing changes. So networking with other GD RAM members is always a good idea. You'll be amazed how many deals you find from that. And then you can always do your own marketing and get in contact with the seller directly. And that could be driving for dollars. It could be, my son's doing it right now. And so he's got doorknob hangers and post-it notes, and it could be direct mail. It could be internet marketing. What's that? Pay-per-click, PPC. Could be cold calling. There's a whole bunch of ways could be TV ads like we talked about, right? With all of these, how to find a property, again, I would go to, there's not one right way, right? I get asked all the time, well, what marketing works? Should I do direct mail? Should I do a postcard? Should I do cold calling? And really, it's what do you like doing and what can you stick with for a long time, right? And so it depends on how you're buying properties and what kind of properties you buy, right? It could be you just talk to a realtor and it's done. It could be you talk to a wholesaler, or it could be that you're buying lists and sending out mailers, could be bandit signs. There's no one right way. And I have bought a whole bunch of properties with a realtor. I've bought a bunch from wholesalers. Actually, one of the people who just went through my private money group coaching was a wholesaler that sold me a deal and recognized that I could just pay cash for whatever deals I was buying, and so wanted to learn how to do that. And then I've done a lot of marketing. I've done bandit signs. I've done truck magnets. I've done direct mail, postcards, texts, doorknob hangers, whatever. We've done it all. We've tried it all over the years.
Hey,
All right.
Chad, quick question. So I've been
Yeah.
getting a bunch of calls, I mean, a bunch of calls. How can I stop it? Do I
Yeah, I don't
know?
know that you can. I'm not sure. You can tell the wholesaler that you'll never sell. Well, probably the way to do it is answer the phone and say the house is sold, and they will take you off the list.
Okay. Even though the house was never on for sale to begin with.
Right. All they're doing, so they're buying a list, and it's just this address through county records is this name, and skip trace, it's this phone number. And they're on auto dialers, so they dial 3 or 4 numbers at a time, and whoever picks up, they'll talk to.
Wow.
And so they're hitting, hundreds of calls a day. So, but they're going to just keep calling you unless you say you've sold the house, then they don't ever expect anything to happen. So they would, that's one of the few reasons you would be taken off the list.
So my phone number then is on the public record. So I need to change the phone number that's on the public record.
Man, if you can figure out how to hide your phone number, that'd be a miracle.
Well, you
Well,
can definitely add your number to the do not call registry, but it doesn't stop people from calling you, and it definitely isn't going to necessarily we're finding that the do not call does not include do not text or do not email. So yeah.
Well, they passed regulations about group texting and to make that harder, but all that did was push money into cold calling and auto dialers. So, yeah,
I
I
have
don't.
I have a
You know,
separate question
if
for
you
you
go to
whenever we
True
get.
People Finder and put your name in there, you'll be amazed what comes up. You may have a cell phone number from 10 years ago. You may have an ex-girlfriend from 20 years ago. I mean, it's kind of insane what's tied to you on the internet. So, what were you saying, Kim?
I was going to ask, when you were talking about reaching out to wholesalers, I've seen and heard the phrase about asking people about what is your buy box? Can you speak to that just briefly? Do you have a moment to speak to that just briefly?
Yeah, definitely. Your buy box they're asking you basically what type of deal you're looking for, so that
Are there specific things that generally everybody says, or like, has everybody got just their own unique buy box, or?
everybody should have their own unique buy
Well,
box.
yes, but I
No?
guess general top 5 things that everybody would want to know as a wholesaler. Like, what is the 5
Okay.
things that the wholesaler wants to know about your buy box?
It's gonna really depend on the wholesaler, what they want to know, and really even if they even use the buy box.
Okay.
But usually if you're on the list, you get any leads they have. But for a buy box, let's say, I would say I'm looking for any property in 45416, 45426, single family up to whatever amount you have access to, up to $80,000.
Okay, so location, type of property, and the amount that you're looking to spend, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
The most important thing for the wholesaler is going to be location. Should they send you leads in Dayton when a lot of investors don't like Dayton? And price. So if you say, I don't have any money yet, but I'm hoping to get some money, then you won't be on their list at all, right? But if you say anything up to 80,000, then they know you're an actual cash buyer and they'll send you leads that should kind of fit that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. So I'll say one quick thing in addition to that. So like that's all the information I would really give a wholesaler. They don't need to know my exit strategy. They don't need to know how I'm funding the deal. Any of that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get at. That right there.
Yeah.
Just don't tell them these extra things.
Right. Yeah, you don't need to tell them any of that. There's no proof of funds with a wholesaler. It's just if you agree to a contract, usually you have to put earnest money down with the title company immediately to hold that contract. Um, but yeah, the main thing I would tell them is what areas you want and what your price point is.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Now, for you and for each of us, we should know pretty detailed what our buy box is, right? So I like these zip codes. I like these types of houses. Are they single family, multifamily? Are they apartments? Are they 1 story, 2 story? Do I care if there's a garage? Um, excuse me. We should be really detailed on it. And then where does it fall in line with the 1% rule? How high are we willing to go with the 70% rule? Is it a buy and hold? Are we funding it with private money or seller financing? We need to know all of those things.
Chad, what's the 1% rule?
Okay, 1% rule is just a real quick glance to see if a deal has any potential. You take the purchase price times 1%, and the rent should be equal to or greater than that. So, quick example, $100,000 house times 1% is $1,000. The rent for that house should be $1,000 or more. If you have a house where the market rent is $900 and it's listed at 110, then that's not a deal even worth looking at. If you start getting into really good deals, then you're looking at, 1.5%, 2%. I've hit some deals that are 3% or more. But that's like a really high level glance. Is this even worth looking at? You don't even have to look at the details of the house. If it's listed at 150 and it's going to rent for 1,000, who cares? We're moving on, right? So 1% rule, if it's listed at 150,000, it better at least rent for 1,500.
Copy. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Hey Chad, is it
Yep.
true because somebody does a seller finance, they have to increase the price of the property?
No, 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 no. Um, I always talk about on my presentations that if they offer financing, I will generally pay more for the property than I would all cash. Right? So they'll make more money if they offer financing. But you remember, I already said that if I pay all cash, I'm getting it at the most 70 cents on the dollar or 70% of ARV, right? So, but it's just what the two of you can negotiate. There's nothing that says they have to increase the price.
I was speaking to somebody and she was like, yeah, the property's worth 100, but I have to go up on the price because I'm gonna do a seller finance and it makes sense for both of us. It didn't make sense to me at the moment. I'm not too savvy, but I felt like she was trying to take advantage.
Well, if you think it through, okay, it depends on the seller financing a little bit, right? Let's say this house. We are adding new episodes every week, so make sure and subscribe and check out all of our content at truewealthinvestors.com.